Ça a vraiment été difficile parce que on a eu certaines difficultés à la frontière.
Qu'est-ce qu'on vous a dit?
On a accepté d'abord seulement les Ukrainiens pour puissent passer. Oui. Et nous, les Congolais, nous mettaient à côté. Donc, on doit attendre qu'on finisse avec tous les Ukrainiens pour qu'on commence avec nous. Et quand nous, on se précipite pour entrer, les Ukrainiens crient pour qu'on puisse nous...
So you're from Kinshasa, you were waiting in line at the border. They told you the Ukrainians are going first and then you will get your turn. On vous a dit, vous attendez de côté une fois que les Ukrainiens passent?
Oui, on fait passer les Ukrainiens, mais nous, on nous met à côté. Si tu veux passer, on nous a amené des chiens. Là, c'était au début, mais là, c'était avant nous. Nous, on s'est battu pour traverser. Je fais ça.
That was CTV's Danielle Hamamjan speaking with Black students at the Ukraine-Poland border. As thousands scramble to flee Ukraine, there are growing reports of non-white residents stuck at the borders. African students and residents trying to flee are reporting being pushed back at border crossings, experiencing racism and aggression at train stations as well. Some claim they've been placed at the bottom of the priority list for refugees. Not everybody at these borders is Ukrainian. Some are students from Nigeria, Egypt, Morocco, India, and other countries, and they too are trying to get to Poland and neighboring nations, just like everyone else. The reports are drawing accusations of racism, and here to discuss this is Walied Khogali Ali, co-founder of Coalition Against White Supremacy and Islamophobia. Walied also has family in eastern Ukraine. And Anna Triandafyllidou is Canada Excellence Research Chair on Migration and Integration at Ryerson University. Thank you both for being with us. Walied, where is your family in Ukraine? When did you last speak with them? And are they trying to leave?
Yeah, well, I spoke with my family is actually in the eastern province of Ukraine, and I'm actually deeply concerned about their well-being because I haven't had contact with them for 5 days now, it's fairly troubling. We just had a war happen last week. I'm shocked about the escalation. I'm worried about their safety, and I'm praying that they're safe, and I hope they get out safely. And I'm glad you're having this very important conversation.
Anna, when you see these videos surface on social media and reports of Black, brown, Middle Eastern students being told to wait, that the Ukrainians will go first, how do you respond to that? What is your reaction?
Well,
I think it's terrible. It's unacceptable. The right to asylum is a universal human right. It's been established after World War II for good reasons. And it is hard to believe that a country like Poland that did suffer during World War II would have, this attitude. I also want to emphasize, because the people interviewed, like the students from different African countries, they say the Ukrainians will go first. But what we know is the white will go first. And that's unfortunate because you listed a number of countries. And what I see in common in people who are originally from these countries is that they look different than whatever we could call the average Ukrainian. So I think it's terrible. On the other hand, I'm afraid that we have seen this happening when we had Middle Eastern people fleeing from Turkey to Belarus in the effort to enter Poland and the European Union. We saw terrible things happening in October and November. And unfortunately, that is something that we shouldn't forget. Also, at the same time, I realize it's an emergency situation for everyone, but precisely the right to protection, the right to safety is a human right.
Right. And Walied, Ukraine, as some of us know, is home to thousands of students from African countries. You know, some students are there, they're studying medicine, they're studying to become engineers. Does it surprise you that even in times of war, there is time for racism?
It's shocking, but it speaks to anti-Black racism exists globally. And I am shocked that folks who are seeking refuge, folks who are fleeing for their lives, other human beings are not being treated with empathy. They've been told to go to the back of the line, like Rosa Parks, like any other, it's like it's like you do not deserve to live. And that is shocking. And I think our Prime Minister must reach out to all the NATO allies, must reach out to Ukraine, and must remind them of their responsibility to treat all of us as human beings, not just some of us. And I'm actually very critical of the media coverage of labeling some of us as uncivilized. War is not something that is a norm for any human being to experience. And I think the whole world is calling for peace and humanity. But also we need to address anti-Black racism in all its manifestations. And thank you for covering this very important story, because it has to be told.
Yeah, well said, Walied. And I'm wondering if you can highlight the differences, if any, in treatment given to migrants and refugees from the Middle East and Africa. Maybe you could also talk about the Syrians who came to Europe back in 2015.
Well, I want to emphasize, first of all, something that because I have friends and colleagues in Poland, and I know they are participating in NGOs who are had been trying also during the previous incidents in October and November, had been there at the border trying to provide refuge, to give assistance, to go to the forest, and oftentimes they were not even allowed to arrive at the border. So I want to emphasize that, because I don't want this to seem like a blanket, all Polish people or all Ukrainian people or all any people are the same. So I want to say that, and we have heard these good stories also in this case, but I want to agree with Walied. It's terrible what is happening. It's totally unacceptable, and you're right, Walied, in what you say. Okay, there are things to be said. It's clear that Poland and Ukraine are in a way sister nations. There are very tight relations between the two nations. There are many Ukrainians. There's a historical minority, Ukrainian historical minority in Poland. There's many Ukrainians who are labor migrants, and Ukrainians have been labor migrants in many European countries. And clearly we see that in this emergency, where people are reaching out to family and friends trying to find refuge. At the same time, I see something else, someone who is from a totally different country, a different continent, and was there to study or was there to work for family reasons. They are obviously the first who feel the need to flee at the war, because they're not involved in this war. I think also, going back to what you said about the previous crisis in Syria, I think we can remember very well back in 2015 and 16 how things evolved. And we remember Angela Merkel, then Chancellor of Germany, saying, "Wir schaffen das, we can do this." And there was really a huge and important wave of solidarity with people waiting, like citizens of different countries like Austria, Germany, and many other countries waiting in the train stations to greet the people and provide refuge and provide shelter. But we also saw that this was overturned when the numbers increased. And that remains for me a question mark on what will happen if this war is protracted and more Ukrainians and others flee the war. So that is one thing. The second thing is that we have seen that at the time already Hungary and Poland were very reluctant. Reluctant actually is an understatement, to take refugees despite the pressures exercised by the European Union. And this has remained to this day. And I want to also explain, because I think, Walied, if you allow me, I think in Canada we have a different sensitivity on these issues, like it is right that we should have, and there's a long way to go here too. I just want to explain that I'm afraid in Central Eastern Europe, in countries particularly like Poland and Hungary, there is a very high tolerance for racism. That is, in my view, what I would say. Not everyone is actively racist, but there is a very high tolerance. It's like it's something normal. Oh, these people are different. These people are Muslims. These people are black. They're brown. They look different. They're not Christian. They're not white. So there is a very high tolerance for that. And I think that is what we have seen also in these horrible reports also of when people were allowed into Poland, and then they went to the hotels that were assigned for the refugees, and they faced racial discrimination there. And really, it is very difficult to believe that this is happening in Central Eastern Europe, that has, suffered from World War II, has suffered from the ugly side of communism.
Okay. Walied, we've been speaking with Akba Mohammed. He is a Syrian refugee journalist who's been quoted in the Washington Post talking about this issue. If we can maybe bring up a board. Here's what he told CP24, and this is part of his statement to me. It says, bombs do not discriminate, neither gender nor race nor color. They do not distinguish between white, black, and blonde. A refugee is a refugee. What is your reaction to his statement and what he's seeing and how he's feeling tonight?
Well, his statement is a statement of empathy, a fact. Bombs don't discriminate. You're a human being at the end of the day. Doesn't matter whether it's your gender, your sexual orientation, your race. These artificial divisions that we create as human beings to dehumanize each other and to hurt each other is disgusting. And there should be no tolerance of that. Not in 2022, when we just went through a pandemic, when we just realized how we're all interconnected, when we realize that if we don't cooperate and work together, we will not be able to overcome the real challenges, the real crisis, climate crisis, there's so many things that matter that we should all focus on, not racism. Racism should never be tolerated. And I'm hoping that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, I'm hoping our government shows leadership by making it clear to our NATO allies and specifically the Ukrainian government and the Polish government, this must stop.
Okay, and Walied, as I'm just going to interrupt you here for a moment because it is important that we reference this. Late today, we heard from Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Minister announcing that an emergency hotline for refugees of color has now been set up. There's a number on your screen, so if you have a family member who's stranded, who needs help, they can call that number. Once again, an emergency hotline has been set up for African, Asian, and other students wishing to leave Ukraine because of Russia's invasion. We'll have to leave it there. Walied and Anna, thank you so much for this very important conversation. We so appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Very much.